Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Grants 101 workshop. We're going to be talking about what is a grant, where do they come from, and how do I get one. So before we get started, just some housekeeping. If you can hear me, let me know. Type a yes, or let me know that you can hear me in the chat box. The people that can't hear me won't be able to hear this, obviously, but if they can put no in the chat box, then I'll make sure. Thank you, everybody. I see your things coming through. Everyone else is muted. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat box, and if it makes sense, we'll answer them as we go, and if not, we'll hold the questions till the end, and we can answer them at that time. Just a few updates of what's new at CGU. So we have our Flame magazine that should be coming out soon. We also have an upcoming events email, so all of the alumni events that come out, every month you'll get an email, so make sure alumni@cgu.edu is added to your email list so that you're getting those emails and you know about all the networking events and events that the school is doing. Also, we have school-based e-newsletters, so make sure you add university.communications@cgu.edu so you can see what's new in the school that you graduated from. And then make sure that you go to the alumni website, cgu.edu/alumni, so that you can review your alumni benefits and use them. We also have another upcoming webinar on February 12th. We'll be talking about connecting with alumni to grow your network. And then we also have some great alumni events coming up in the next month or so. So on the 15th, we'll have a mixer in Seattle. And then on the 16th, we'll have a movie screening with the School of Education Studies, but anybody is welcome to attend that. We'll have a few talks. There's one on February 26th and February 27th. And again, if you go to cgu.edu/events, you'll be able to see all of our upcoming events there. And then finally, just make sure that if you are interested in growing your career, changing careers, that you take advantage of the Career Development Office. That's another benefit that you get as an alum for the rest of your life. And if you aren't aware, there's also a job portal that has job events and also job listings on that website. So it's cgu.joinhandshake.com. And the great benefit about this is it's connected to all of the Claremont colleges. So if Harvey Mudd posts the job from Tesla, or maybe Claremont McKenna College posts the job, you will also be able to see that and apply through that portal. And then if you're interested if you have expertise that you want to share on a webinar, let me know. Or if you're interested in helping host a regional event like the Seattle event that we're having this month, just reach out to me and we can get something planned and see if there's a strong enough alumni base in that area to host an event out there. And then make sure you are watching social media and your inbox for all the events that are coming up. And if you want to reach out to me, this is my email address. Shaheen Plunier is the, Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement for the Drucker School. So if you're a Drucker alum, you can reach out to either of us. And then make sure you're watching us on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. And finally, if you change jobs or if you change email addresses or even physical addresses, make sure you update us, because we send out emails and information for events based on where you're living. So if you move to Seattle, but I don't know you're living there, the last place you were in is LA, then you're probably not going to get that invitation. So the better information that we have on you, the better we're able to serve you. So without further ado, I'd like to get Kevin on, and he's going to start talking about Grants 101.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So a couple quick points before I jump in to the webinar. One, I just thought I'd introduce myself real quick. My name's Kevin Riel. I've been the Assistant Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations at Claremont Graduate University for 6 years. And I've been also a student here for almost 10 years. I got my master's back in 2011. And I've been slowly trudging through the program and hopefully graduate this May if everything goes according to plan. Another point at the outset, this is going to be almost offensively rudimentary to some people. I'm going to proceed as if you know next to nothing about grants. Part of the reason that I'm doing that is because in my experience, a lot of people who you would think would know a lot about grants and grant making actually don't. And so, you know, why is that? Because you don't get Grants 101 in undergraduate, you don't get it in graduate school. It's one of those things you're just supposed to kind of learn by osmosis. And of course, sometimes that just never happens for people. So part of the spirit of this is trying to just fill in, you know, a foundation of very basic concepts around grants. The other thing to point out is that this is called Grants 101 and not Grant Writing 101, and part of the reason is the writing part sometimes is a very small aspect of a much larger process. Like when family members ask me what I do, I usually say grant writing just to simplify things. But you know, if they really wanted to get into the weeds, grant writing is just, you know, one part of a much larger process. And so I'm going to speak to that larger process as well. So without further ado, what is a grant? I'm not talking about Ulysses S. Grant, obviously. A grant is funds dispersed by an institution, a grant maker, either a governmental entity, corporation, foundation, trust, or fund, to a recipient, a grantee, usually a 501c3 and by 501c3, that's the tax status. You'll hear that term thrown around to identify nonprofit organizations, such as educational institutions, hospitals, museums, etc. Or could be you, an individual. Generally grants, oh, actually let me back up. Private for-profit businesses also receive grants. It's less common, but like small business grants. I helped someone on a small business grant for women entrepreneurs not that long ago. So for-profit institutions also receive grants too. Generally, grants are made for a specific purpose. For instance, research, fellowships, programs, a capital project, etc. I'm going to talk more about all that by way of a proposal or application, which is called grant writing. So again, very, very basic, simple stuff. How do I cycle through? Just click the, okay, cool. Grant makers, again, super basic. These are the usual suspects. Foundations. A foundation is a non-governmental entity that is established as a nonprofit corporation or a charitable trust with a principal purpose of making grants to unrelated organizations, institutions, or individuals for scientific, educational, cultural, religious, or other charitable purposes. Pretty simple. Corporations. This is a little bit more dynamic here. A corporate foundation is a private foundation that derives its grant-making funds primarily from the contributions of a profit-making business. The company-sponsored foundation often maintains close ties with the donor company, but it is a separate legal organization, sometimes with its own endowment, and is subject to the same rules and regulations as other private foundations. So typically, okay, I don't want to bash corporate giving. Typically, corporate giving, though, these are grants that are made that support an industry. So it's not purely philanthropic. Usually these are grants made to support things like professional development, which may support employees of the corporation. It may support things like community development within a market or a place that the corporation does business. So you can sometimes almost think of corporate giving as like quasi-philanthropic investments that they hope will, you know, enhance their ability to you know, get revenue sometime later down the road. Sometimes corporate giving is for PR purposes. My colleague Mary Jo at CGU likes to call this guilt money, and certainly that happens. A salient example, GM is under fire right now for using Martin Luther King to help sell trucks in a Super Bowl, in their Super Bowl ad. I wouldn't be surprised if they feel compelled to make a contribution to the Martin Luther King Center. Things like that. That definitely happens. Okay, governmental departments. These are entities set up by legislative or executive branches of government to fund areas of need in their respective districts, states, or nationwide. A lot of research activity comes out of governmental departments, government grants. These are organizations like, the National Endowment for the Humanities, NIH, et cetera, et cetera. Types of grants. Okay, I don't mean Hugh and Carrie. I mean things like general operating grants. So I'm going to go over these real basically. General operating grants, another term in the biz that we like to use is unrestricted grants. We love these at CGU. Nonprofits love them everywhere. It's basically money that the organization can use for wherever they have the greatest need. Sometimes these are called keeping the lights on grants. They're similar to, like, if you give to the Sierra Club or the Audubon Society, those monies go to unrestricted, and they can help fund a whole array of activities at the organization. Program grants, these are similar, but they support a particular program or project within an organization. For instance, a new exhibit in a museum, a new laboratory in a university, so on and so forth. So they're not supporting the organization as a whole, they're supporting some kind of activity within the organization. Planning grants, seed money. So planning grants fund a program or project at its infant stage when you're sort of planning it. Sometimes you need to jumpstart a program with some money to develop what something larger might be. And a lot of times when you get planning grants or seed money, the expectation is that you might go back to the same funder for a much larger ask down the road. Seed money, again, it's startup funds for a program in hopes that, this is going to lead to something larger later. Facilities or equipment grants, these are also called capital grants or brick and mortar grants. They support everything from buildings to computers, lab equipment, just tangible items that an organization might need. Technical assistance grants, these are kind of interesting. They help an organization manage itself better. So it might be an organization might need help with marketing or fundraising or financial planning. There are grants that help an organization improve itself in certain aspects. Another name for this is an in-kind grant. So say you're a marketing firm and you want to assist a nonprofit with some of your marketing software. That might be called an in-kind grant. It's not money, but it's a service that is given to that organization. Endowments. This is another grant that everyone loves. This is funding that is invested by an organization, and an organization will then only spend the interest, usually about 5%. So, for instance, an endowment gift at CGU might be for a scholarship program or for a chair for a faculty. And if, say, the initial gift is $1 million, then that endowment, which is investment, will you'll receive about 5% every year from that endowment. So if the gift was $1 million, you'll get $50,000 every year that can help, say, give scholarships to students or help underwrite the salary of a faculty person, so on and so forth. Program-related investments. These are no or low interest loans to nonprofits, and for some nonprofits that's critical. Research grants, probably most of you are alums, so you know a little something about this. This is what your faculty were trying to secure, and maybe some of you worked on research grants with them. These are grants that support a research project, almost always for faculty. So these are people who are operating under the imprimatur of, an organization, a university, but not always. Sometimes individual scholars will receive grants who aren't, in the employ of a university. But that just depends. Most of it is giving to a faculty person, and usually those grants include what's called indirect costs. So sometimes you'll add to your proposal anywhere from 30 to 60% of the total, and that helps support the work of the university. So we love research grants here at CGU, not only because they support the work of our faculty who are, doing really important work in a whole range of fields, but we also get a slice of that money here at CGU. So, and those indirect costs are unrestricted. Scholarships and fellowships, you all know about that. That supports a student or scholar as they pursue their academic goals, and can be enormously helpful. Grant writing. Basic forms and materials. The basic, okay, you've all heard, I'm sure, of a proposal, but a proposal is one part of a more intricate kind of like back and forth. Sometimes the initial contact is through what's called a letter of intent or interest, an LOI. An LOI is nice because it's a short form proposal. It's a kind of rarefied proposal. So basically, it's 1 or 2 pages introducing the kind of project that you want to pitch to the grant maker. So a lot of grant makers ask for an LOI mostly as a kind of time-saving device because they're short. And instead of reading a 20-page proposal, they can get the gist of whether you're a fit for their strategies for what they want to give money for at the outset. Proposal or digital application. So this can mean a whole range of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. A digital application, a lot of foundations are going, they're sort of like throwing away the old 20-page proposal model or 10-page proposal model for a digital application. And so basically what that is you're going on to, their hosted website and you're filling in a whole range of fields. And those fields will ask you questions like, what's your program about? And there'll be a character count, and you'll have to, sort of squeeze your pitch into 3,000 characters. And then they'll ask you things like, what are the goals of your program or project? How are you going to evaluate success within this program project? So on and so forth. A budget, these can be really simple or super, super elaborate, especially if you're working on like a multi-year grant. Basically, they're just to chart how you're going to spend the money. Sometimes it's a 5-page spreadsheet, and sometimes it's 2 lines on a Word doc. It really can run the gamut. Attachments, a lot of times grant makers will want to see things like who's on your board of directors, if you are an organization. Who's on your board of directors? They'll want to see your organizational budget and your financial info. And the reason they'll want to see that is they'll want to know, are you as an organization in good standing, and do you have sort of demonstrated, have you demonstrated that you can be a good steward with, your financial, with the financial aspect of your dealings? So are you going to then be a good steward of the grant money? And sometimes that's really important to some funders, and some funders don't care so much, but certainly it's part of the process. So a report, this is on the back end. This is when you get, if your grant is awarded, sometimes there are interim reports that are required. So maybe every quarter or every year of a multi-year grant, you'll be expected to submit a report. And in a report, you may be asked to talk about, how the project's going, how the money has been expended, have you spent all the money, if you haven't, how much, are things going according to plan? And at some point, almost always, if you do get a grant, you'll submit a final report, and you'll really just sort of, break down everything that happened. Final reports are also really good because they're an opportunity to brag about the impact of your work, and to introduce possibly a future proposal, to give them like a germ of an idea that this program or project might lead to something else or something larger, and maybe they want to partner up on that too. Finding a fit, prospect research. So in my experience, in a university setting, which is certainly not the only setting for prospect research or for grants, but here I often find that prospect research is the hardest part of the process. A lot of what I do is being a matchmaker. I have relationships with faculty, with deans, with the executive leadership of Claremont Graduate University, and they all have programs, projects that they would like to find funding partners for. And so one aspect of my job is finding those people, finding those foundations, corporations, so on and so forth, that are playing in the same space and that might consider joining forces with us. So one place that I look for, or one thing that I look for when I'm trying to find funding for a faculty person, I'm trying to find requests for proposals, also called RFPs. These are public statements made by funding organizations to the outside world saying, we would like to receive proposals on in a given funding area. And I find these in places like the Chronicle for Higher Education, various industry publications, listservs. There are a lot of, really depending on the kind of field that you're working in, you might be able to find, the particular RFPs that you're looking for. But one thing to say at this point is that foundations are complete snowflakes. They're all very individual. They all do business in their own very idiosyncratic ways. And some do RFPs, some don't. Some want you to know a lot about them. Some don't want you to know anything about them. And so part of this is just sort of being flexible and I guess sort of just realizing that you're working with a motley group of organizations, and some it's very easy to know, for instance, what Ford or Coca-Cola what spaces they're funding in, but there are some foundations where it's next to impossible, and unless you have some kind of a contact on the inside or some kind of way through the back door, it's impossible to know. Now, RFPs are just one of the most simple ways to find out, if the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is sending out RFPs, I know exactly, what they want, the type of work they want to fund. Another great way to find out about prospects is to talk to your contacts who work in similar spaces. You might reach out to faculty mentors that you may have still at CGU, professional mentors, depending on sort of your grant needs. Work through your network, talk to people, send people emails. Another thing to do is just use your classic search engine. You could Google grants in the field that you're working in. That can be useful, though a lot of times you're just sifting through a lot of chaff trying to find relevant opportunities. And so it's not the best way to find what you're looking for, but it's certainly a way. For me, the best way is the Foundation Directory online. This is what I think virtually all universities have a subscription. It's a massive database of thousands of U.S.-based and international foundations that are easily searchable, by a range of criteria and items. The problem is that it's a very expensive subscription. So if you're an individual looking for fellowships, or you're looking for a grant because you're an entrepreneur, so on and so forth, you're not, maybe you could do the free trial and get on there for a couple of weeks and find as much as you can, and then sneak out. That's actually not a bad idea, especially if you're looking for fellowship opportunities. But Foundation Directory Online is not going to make a ton of sense for you, unless you're part of a larger organization. So say you're beginning to develop a list of opportunities. Maybe you got onto FDO, or you're finding things via Google, or maybe a professional mentor has given you a list of opportunities. You're going to want to go into their websites and learn more and find out if they're an actual alignment for the type of work that you need funding for. And what you're going to do, you might start with a list of 20, you might start with a list of 10. You're going to start to weed out those that you're not a good fit for. And it's really important to do that. I work with a lot of students who they see that for instance, the Haynes Foundation does dissertation grants for students who are working on public policy in Los Angeles. And it's $20,000, which is a sweet fellowship. And I get a lot of interest from students, but a lot of times their dissertation or their work doesn't align with the foundation, and they just sort of see the dollar signs of the amount. And I never dissuade them from actually applying, because I think, submitting a small proposal is a healthy undertaking. But I do tell them from the outset, I don't think you're going to get this. And this is really just an exercise in you pinning down what your proposal's about in 6 pages. If you're not a perfect alignment, don't waste your time. Just move on. Unless, it is like I'm saying, some kind of an opportunity to just, not expend too much time and go through the process of actually doing a proposal, then go for it. But a lot of times you just, if they're not giving to work in the space that you operate in, just move on and look for something else. Another thing to do is find deadlines, find out the deadlines, and plan your year around them. And of course, give yourself plenty of time, because some of these proposals take months to prepare. Okay, pre-proposal planning, the application process. So this is basically when you're gearing up to apply. You're getting ready to write the LOI or the proposal. And every application process is different. Some organizations want a page's worth of basic information, and some want a book-length portfolio. Some proposals will take you, a matter of hours, 4 hours, 2 hours, and some will take you several months. So obviously it helps to know, what you're committing yourself to at the outset. I'd say a lot of the corporate grants and the smaller foundation grants, those are really easy. Sometimes they just take, they'll take you a day. If you're applying for a government grant, you better give yourself some time, because sometimes those proposals are almost on the order of like writing an article for publication. They're 30 pages, 40 pages long. They require all kinds of background information. They require a bunch of work from the institution that you're a member of. They're monsters. So be prepared for what you're getting yourself into. Regardless of the demands, there are best practices that apply to all types of proposal writing. Number one, again, I've said this before, make sure the fit is right. It's a good idea to look at past grantees. Where have they given to people who are doing work similar to you? That's a good indication that you have a good shot. If not, then not. Two, if possible, get in contact with a program officer or someone at the funding organization. Now, again, like when I'm talking about how every foundation is a snowflake, some foundations are very open, and there are people that you can call on the phone and have lovely conversations with, and sometimes they're like a menacing fortress on a hill, and there's no way in, and there's no one to talk to. And in general, if you can get someone on the inside to talk with you, that's going to vastly improve your chances of getting a grant. If that person is a program officer, you can ask them things like guidance or feedback on your proposal. Do they think it's fundable? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think your board would be interested? Sometimes the program officer helps make the decision about whether you get funding, and sometimes they're the go-between between you and the board who sift through proposals and pick grantees. It really depends. Every organization's different, but if you can get a program officer on the phone, that's great. It just helps your chances so much, and sometimes something that you say picks the interest of a program officer, and then they may have a conversation with someone internally at the organization, and that could possibly lead to you having a much better chance of getting a grant. And keep in mind that even some of these smaller foundations or corporate foundations sometimes are looking through hundreds of proposals, and they're going to give out 4. So any way that you can get a toehold, or you can help yourself stand out, and the best way is by knowing people inside the organization, do it. If you know someone on the board, if you know someone who works within a corporation, ask them if they will possibly, first I would ask them for guidance on, what on your proposal or your idea, but ask them too, if you have a good relationship with them, would they be willing to shepherd the proposal for you or offer feedback? We got a big grant here 3 years ago, and part of our success with that is we had an alum who worked in the company, and they actually ushered the grant in for us. And of course, we don't know for sure if that's what got us the grant, but I'm sure it didn't hurt. So anything you can do on that end, do it. The other thing is follow guidelines like your life depends on it, for sure. Proposal writing. Okay, so I've said it before, follow the rules, for sure. There's nothing that will get your proposal thrown in the nearest trash can faster than just not following the rules. It's just standard, but you know that. Okay, need statement. So this is maybe some new information for some people who've never written a proposal before. This is not how everyone crafts a proposal, but this is how I tend to like to craft a proposal. I begin it with a problem that the work that we're doing will address. This is where you grab their attention. Introduce them to a societal problem or need, and then discuss how your work is going to solve that problem and save the world. A little license with drama is okay. I like to start with some kind of, some statistics usually, or some kind of like arresting event, something that's going to demonstrate some low or high level crisis. And then that is a springboard for you to introduce the kind of work you do and how the work you do is going to help solve this problem. Of course, you don't want to be hyperbolic, but you do want to be dramatic. I mean, you do want to catch their attention. And of course, we all know there are plenty of problems in the world for your work to touch on. So, so use that, as a kind of vehicle to, make your proposal stand out. Re-articulate the funder's mission and goals. This is another thing that not everyone does, but it's something that I like to do. If the foundation has a website, you can read about their mission, you can read about some of the past work they've done, you can find the language that they use to talk about themselves and integrate that language into the proposal as a way to demonstrate that you think more of them than just funder X. And you're not just copy and pasting the same proposal you sent to 5 other foundations, that you really care about the work that they do and acknowledge the work that they do. It's just another way to make yourself a little bit more agreeable to people who sometimes are reading through, like I said, a dozen proposals in a day, and they've got 90 more to go through in the next week. Write well, succinctly, and memorably, that, but it has to be said. Okay, so watch the jargon. In general, I think this is true. I mentioned the Haynes Foundation a little earlier. They do a lot of philanthropy in the realm of research. They support a lot of university work in Los Angeles County, but their board is not made up of academics. These are business people, these are doctors, lawyers. Eric Garcetti is on the board, last I checked. So these are people who, if you're working in a super specialized field with, very elaborate jargon, they're not going to understand it. So you need to translate it for them. You need to make sure that they're going to be able to fully metabolize, the information that you're laying out to them. Now, unless that's what they're into. There are other foundations like the Simmons Foundation gives for math research, and that's their kink. They're into like really specialized, elaborate jargon. And so obviously, if that's the case, let her rip. Have someone copy edit your work. Again, of course you know this, but I have to say it because it is less common than you would think. Make sure you have all of the materials that they ask for. Make sure you're able to get all the attachments that they want. If you're part of a university, you might have to reach out to someone like me within the university to provide things like, financial information. If you need a letter of recommendation, definitely make sure that you solicit that way before the deadline, because I've worked on grants with students and they waited till a week before the deadline to ask their faculty for letter of recommendations, and faculty hate to do letter of recommendations in general, and they put it off, and the person didn't get all their materials in on time because the faculty lagged. So it happens, it's a horror story. Be mindful of how much time you have to accomplish everything. For me, I like to make a week early my deadline because stuff happens. So keep that in mind. Whoops. Okay, what should I be doing in the meantime? I think this is really important, especially if you're just sort of getting your sea legs in the grant world. Know thyself. Who are you as a scholar, professional, organization? What are the needs or problems that your expertise or organization addresses? Just know who you are. Know how the work you're doing can make a positive impact in the world. with this in mind, develop an elevator pitch. Not to bore your friends and family, but it's important to have just in your back pocket. Sometimes you're at a party and you never know who you may meet, and sometimes, you know, a 1 or 2 minute pitch of the work you do could lead to something down the road. But if you have only a kind of like vague sense of how your work, you know, impacts things in the real world, then, you know, you might not be able to make as convincing or interesting an argument. Another thing that I like to do is have a page-length description of the work I do on file. This is just simply who I am as a scholar, who I am as a, you know, who we are as a university. I have a CGU file where I have our mission, and I have just, you know, boilerplate language about this is the type of work we do, these are the fields that we work in, so on and so forth. Definitely maintain an updated resume and CV. Reach out to people in the profession, for sure. Take them out to lunch, coffee, dinner, beer, tequila, if that's your thing. Actually, one of you, we're having drinks tomorrow night. I do this all the time. I think it's so important. You never know where it's going to lead. At the very least, you know, you build friendships. You learn about how other organizations work. You learn about, you know, you might learn about another place you might like to work. You know, it's just an important thing that you should for sure be doing. Definitely also build a network on social media and in real life. In that spirit, good luck and keep in touch. This is my email address. That's my LinkedIn page. Feel free to contact me with questions. I'm always happy to hear from people and talk shop.